Welcome to The Lead Climb, the podcast where we break down the strategies that drive patient acquisition and growth in behavioral health. Hosted by Growth Sherpa Consulting, we bring you expert insights on digital marketing, admissions, business development, and more, so your treatment center, mental health clinic, or private practice can thrive. Whether you're a CEO, admissions director, or marketing pro, this is where you'll find the tools to scale smarter. Follow us up the mountain. Let's lock in.
Appreciate everyone joining us again today. Today I have Cameron Bolish here with Strategic Readiness Consulting. Cameron, why don't you tell everyone about yourself?
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Stephen. And it's a privilege to be here and speak to this audience. I've spent the last decade plus in healthcare leadership, primarily focused in mental behavioral health. And worked myself up. I was an admissions director on the East Coast and then a business development director on the West Coast. I worked for corporate Acadia out of Franklin, Tennessee, and then I was privileged to be a CEO for them in one of their locked psychiatric hospitals. And then as of late, transitioned to Discovery Behavioral Health and ended up being their regional CEO over multiple facilities in Texas. And currently, I'm serving in a freelance capacity. A lot of the colleagues that I've met over the years have asked me to come in and share experience, strength, and hope with them. And what a privilege it is to give back everything that I've learned. I definitely want to give so that the mistakes that I've made along the way don't have to be made by others. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, appreciate having you. I'm really excited for this call too. A lot of the requests that myself and Growth Sherpa get brought in on are very black and white managerial requests, talking about P&Ls, talking about the finances of treatment organizations. But I'm a leadership junkie. I love culture. I love leadership. Why don't you tell me a little bit from your CEO perspective, when you enter a new treatment center, either from the ground up or you coming in to replace a former CEO, how do you establish and share the vision of the culture that you have for the organization? And what are some of the first things that you do to lay that groundwork in that new center?
Brilliant question, and definitely, must be very strategically rolled out. First and foremost, I don't ever try to change anything. I try to learn. I try to absorb. I try to observe. I want to learn who the players are, whether they're good players or bad players. If we've inherited them, I want to learn who they are and the potential that they possess, and want to learn where the culture is and why it is the way it is from where it came. And along that observation period, when I'm integrating myself into their culture, because that's really what's happening, is I'm starting to take mental notes about things that are working that we can continue on excelling, and things that perhaps need a little refreshment or revisement. And I put together a rollout plan where we're not changing too many variables at once. And that way we can really recognize what's working in the progression and what's not. And, I get that question a lot, followed up by the second question is, what's the toughest thing about being a leader? You've run hundreds of employees. What's the toughest thing? And it's personality management. We have to be prepared that everybody has a personality that is subject to change throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the course of employment. And so remembering the care and compassion we give to our patients, we should also give that same care and compassion to ourselves and to our employees.
That's actually one of the things I had to learn early in my career. I've had a blessing in my career of managing individual contributor, managing, taking a step back, and having that progression with a reflection period in between, especially early in my career, which is an absolute blessing to be able to reflect upon yourself as a leader as you mature throughout your career. Probably one of the first things I did as a leader early in my career was come in like a bull in a china shop, because of course I knew it all. I'm the leader, right? And made those mistakes and didn't take the personality management in check and didn't earn the respect, right? So you had the authority, but you didn't have the earned influence over that. And as you can imagine, there were varying degrees of results, but at what cost, right? And so that's a great lesson for any initial leader. And personality management is interesting too. So I don't know if you've seen this, when I take over, especially established teams, there's always those key influencers on each team across each department. I don't necessarily know if people who are newer to leadership know how to navigate that, because that can be the biggest gift in your world or the biggest thorn in your side. Can you share a little bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for sharing your experience. I've had similar. And I think that's why I've learned as of late, because you're right. The truth be told, at when my first CEO job, I thought I could rule the world, right? You're a brand new CEO, and was humbled very quickly, specifically by night nurses and night BHTs. They are the ones that'll humble you fast. And so um, going back to your question about key stakeholders and personalities within adopted leadership teams, we will always see the ones that are positive and are solution focused, and then of course we have the other gamut, those that still can't let go of the past or let go of concerns that they don't feel have been resolved effectively. And so I what I tend to do is once there's a period where they are starting to trust me, starting to allow me in, starting to let their guard down and really show who they truly are, not necessarily the best foot forward anymore, right? We're past that, dare I say, in the workplace honeymoon period. And the personal rapport starts to parallel the professional rapport. I tend to do exercises with my intimate leadership teams of vulnerability. Same type of exercises we would do with our patients in a process group, evaluating strengths and weaknesses. And what starts to come from that is people start to realize, first of all, they're not alone in their thought process, whether it's a positive thought or a negative thought, they're not alone anymore. And we create a safe space amongst ourselves to share openly. And we're not trying to solve their individual or world problems. We're just creating a space that we can appreciate their point of view. And as that starts to build in its cohesiveness, much like a military operation team that literally has to trust, the person to your left and the person to your right at all times, we start to expand that circle of vulnerability to the next managerial level or the line staff level, and really start to give everybody a voice and remind everybody it's okay to be vocal about where you work in a professional mindset, because we want you to be passionate. We want you to enjoy coming to work. All of us are energy. And if we can come to work with positive and solution focused energy, our patients will feed off that. The newcomer will feed off that. The individual that's having a bad day at home comes to work to get away from that bad day will feed off that. And if we're not careful and we don't focus on that, then of course the negative energy can intercept. And once again, then that has a ripple effect. And so what I've always tried to do is just give total honor to where that staff is, where they are, how they got there, and then start to allow them ownership of where we want to go. And then I will help create a roadmap for us to get there.
I love it. And I'll tell you, one of the first things I do as a leader is I always try to develop, especially with newer teams, a camaraderie, not a commiseration chain. So that I want to make sure, especially outreach teams, which is most of my experiences, I want them in the car between calls, calling each other and learning from each other and saying, hey, this just happened. How do you handle that? And if you have a team of 10, 15, 20 outreach reps leaning on each other's knowledge and expertise, you're having multiple higher efforts. But a couple times in my career, I've come to points where 95% of the team was completely bought in. Let's say 99% completely bought in. There's a couple people who just don't love the change, right? They love the old way, they love the old boss. I'm a little weird at times, a little quirky, so I get it. It's totally fair, right?
You and me both. You and me both.
Yeah, it's yeah. I'm yeah. A lot of people like vanilla ice cream. That's not getting it with me. So I don't know if you've ever tried this, but I've implemented 360 reviews at several organizations I've worked for. And for anyone watching this who hasn't done that yet, very painful, because no matter how good and confident you are as a person, as a leader, as a human, you have some blind spots that get called out and it hurts, right? But in my experience, when doing that and letting the people who were either hiding their struggles with the organization in that camaraderie, they still don't feel vulnerable, open and vulnerable enough to share, or have been vocal about their resentments and the lack and the desire to change, they get it out there, and it gives you an opportunity to address it in a very structured, HR friendly and just vulnerable section. But for me as the leader, I recommend to every leader to do this, but I think for people watching who have not done that or not seen it done, it puts the leader in a very vulnerable spot, because they all come back with a lot of negativity. Executive leadership and HR goes, what is really wrong? Versus, from my standpoint, I'm a flawed human. There's going to be stuff wrong. If there's nothing wrong, that's a bigger red flag. Let's address this as a team, and let's move on and wash this from our organization. I don't know if you've ever tried that, or are there any other strategies that you like, but I don't necessarily like 360 reviews, but I like the outcomes that come from them.
No, I totally agree. I when you were saying that, I was chuckling because I was thinking, all of us at some point probably have a little PTSD from elementary or middle school, when it was the first time we had to get in front of the class and read the book report. And those of us that were nervous, like, and then we had to get feedback from our peers, and it felt like an attack. And even though the teacher, aka moderator, was there, it still felt, wow, But the more we did it, the more we were accepting and open to the feedback, the better the book reports and the public speaking became. And so I truly, like you, value that direct input to where I can improve. And I think the key thing about leadership, one of my greatest mentors, former COO for Acadia Healthcare, Mr. Ron Fincher, I can remember when I first became a CEO and we were all in orientation class, and he said something that I will never forget. Don't let this title make you who you are. Just be you. And there were times, like you said, when I first started, where that title got ahead of Cameron Bolish. And so being able to be vulnerable with the leadership team at first, and knowing that we're going to give them feedback, in acceptance of them giving us feedback, it kind of creates an even playing field, almost like the King Arthur round table. That's what I've always tried to use, the analogy. Rather than the CEO being up here and everybody else following suit, we should be circular. We should all have a voice. Now, at the end of the day, we all have our own responsibilities based on our job titles. But when decisions have to be made and progress needs to be ensued, I think having a unilateral, understanding of what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, and exposing that to my team so that they can share what they're good at and what they're not good at, so that we can really operate cohesively. It kind of reminds me, my wife and I are big fans of Brene Brown, plus we live in Texas right now. And so, Brene's from Houston. But there is a lecture that she gives about the inaccuracy of this married couple, which is 50%, 50-50, right? Like the married couple, no matter what, always has to equate to 100%. And I love that analogy, because she said, sometimes she's only at a 40%, and maybe her husband's only at a 40%. So as a union, they're only at 80%. And they've got to give each other more grace, and they've got to give each other more support, because they're not together at that full 100%. I take that same application to our leadership team. At any given point, we can't always expect to be 110%, 120. We've got to know our limitations and where we are because of external, entities or pressures. And so once we can create that, then we can help each other with our flaws or help each other with our deficiencies. Ironically, the same thing that's happening in our patient groups, our process groups, our educational groups, the same thing that's happening in the recovery rooms. Just using those same principles before personalities in our leadership forum has really created a much stronger, cohesive entity.
It's interesting you bring that up. I remember during COVID, I was leading an outreach team, mostly new. About 60% of the team was new. As the year started, we had this great plan. It was, we're going to do more conferences, we're going to do more tours, we're going to bring more people to campus. And it was literally 2 weeks later, I was like, forget everything I said, new plan. Well, as the year went on, I don't think I actually really shared this with anyone. As the year went on, I had a new child. My son was 9 months when this happened. So 9-month-old.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was something else. I had a passing of a very close family member, and I'm leading this team, to which I felt responsible for the 270 people in the treatment center who worked there, because I think it was about 270. Because if I didn't produce as a team, we don't have a treatment center.
That's it.
And they don't have jobs, and I can find a way to pay my mortgage, but the techs and the BAs and everyone else can't. So took on a lot of pressure. And about 6 months or so into the height of COVID in 2020, I go to my CEO and say, "Can I take a day off? Like I'm afraid to take a day off because I'm afraid to take the foot off the gas, but I am crushed right now. I am at my lowest energy. It's 0%. I can keep going if you need me to, but this is not good." And he's like, "Yeah, take a few days off." So I did. What do you know it, Cameron? Within the next 2 or 3 weeks, every other executive on the team had their own personal days on the calendar. My team were taking their days off. We came back refreshed and started growing. We didn't just survive during COVID, we grew. And I think back on that a lot because I've been a driver my whole career. I've been that guy who has prided himself on being the first person working in an organization and the last person on a given day. Like I can't tell you how many times I started, especially when I was in the field, started my day at 4 a.m. in Charlotte, North Carolina, drive into Wilmington to work all day, and then to end my day in Savannah. Like it was just wildness, right? So so yeah, I think as a leader, giving yourself the permission to take that recharge when you're that 40%, 30%, don't get to 20% happens, but recharge. And I think your team sees that vulnerability with trust. Um, I'm curious to get your thoughts too on the industry. So the industry obviously has a lot of very passionate people, but unlike a lot of industries where leadership is almost a formalized process within their organizations. You go to public accounting firms, you go to Fortune 500s where they have leadership development plans for executives. We, outside of some of the bigger players, don't have a lot of leadership development and training. Where do you see some of the biggest gaps for everyone else who doesn't have that? And where can we as an industry start growing that aspect so that we ultimately serve our patients better?
Yeah, that is a brilliant thought process. I in my occupational career, I spent a decade plus in education, everything from a classroom teacher to a curriculum specialist, and we always made time for professional development. It was required for our licensure. It was required for recertification of credentials, and so it was built in. And so there was never this, hey, we want to do it, but there's never enough time, or we can't pull people together. It was just part of our discipline. And then now fast forward, like you said, to healthcare, where once again, we're dealing with licensed individuals, credentialed individuals that are sometimes forced to do their own classwork or continuing education, outside of work hours, because even though we want to be the very best, we sometimes realize the cost of taking somebody off the unit and actually creating a strategy of classroom is not revenue enhancing per se. And the reality is big corporate healthcare is so backwards that the more we invest in our employees, the stronger we make them, the more education we allow them to gather with our occupational fortitude, the better the outcomes of turnover, the better the outcomes of patient and family experience. And we see it done in small pockets, right? Where the entity might have a national presence, but isn't so large and doesn't want to be so large that they still want to invest in each employee at each facility to make sure the quality of care, the deliverable, the product never falls short. Wish I could say that about some of the larger players that I've worked with and learned from, that as soon as some census points start to drop, well, then it's a panic, and then all of a sudden, no, send this person home, send that person home, make this person work, their salary, so make them work a double. And all of a sudden, they are the pressure that's reducing that 100%, 90, 80, 70, 60, 50. And I think, a valuable organization is one that creates the discipline and values proactive progress rather than just continually to stay reactive, investing in employees, investing in professional development, sending leaders to a leadership conference together and trusting their number twos or their number threes to run the building. I think, it provides that kind of military mindset where we always have to keep the flag. We always have to keep the flag, ablazing. And I only hope that big corporate healthcare starts to realize at the rate of turnover or the lack of patient outcomes when they start cutting too many corners, that if they were just to pause and not focus on census, not focus on ADC, ADR, length of stay, but focus on employees and the relationship they are building with them so that the employees can then enhance the relationship with the patient, revenue comes, outcomes come. It's really putting the people first and the business will come.
Absolutely. So yeah, and there's some interesting tools too. So I know for a lot of people, leadership is sort of an esoteric concept, right? Like it's the soft skills, and it's not important. What's important is the P&Ls, and the PE company that gave me all this money is expecting me to do all these things. Totally get it. However, there is actually some really neat tools we have in our space now where you can say, hey, this therapist is better at treating this type of patient and the outcome studies. So instead of fighting this, why don't we relegate our marketing focus to that type of patient to bring into our types of therapists to have better outcomes? Our therapists now feel refreshed. Our outcomes are now better. Our revenue is now better. Let's look at this entire thing holistically. And to me, that's a fascinating aspect to our space that it's difficult to see when you're in it. Like you said, you get that call on a Sunday night, our census is down, text all your accounts that we have open beds. It's like, well, everyone has open beds. No kidding. Like it's not going to do anything. But instead, there's so many systems you can put in place to actually mathematically leverage the leadership component, which that, in my opinion, satisfies a lot of the blue blazers who are saying, hey, these numbers need to add up or you're in trouble. Have you found any systems like that are actually more quantitative than the qualitative that I know leadership sometimes can feel like it is?
Yeah, dude, this is brilliant. I want to point reference. I literally was on a phone call yesterday with a colleague, new to the CEO role, very experienced in the behavioral health realm, and has progressed up into the CEO role, and reached out to me yesterday, and we had a very, very similar conversation. This is kismet. He's tracking ADR, average daily rate, and he's tracking ADC, average daily census. And of course, corporate is leaning on him. Hey, you got to hit this number. You got to hit this number by Friday. And so, that became the focus of his, and that became what he projected to the team. Got to hit this number, got to hit this number. Well, treatment is what treatment is. No matter how much we wrap around a patient, eventually somebody's going to AMA. Eventually, somebody's going to have to be admin discharged. And hopefully we can proactively get in front of it where it's a soft, admin discharge or perhaps an AMA, but here's some resources to another facility. Like, we always want to be good stewards, but at the end of the day, we have to respect our patient population and their uniqueness. And so he was like, man, the staff knew we had to get to this number, but they let so-and-so AMA, they let so-and-so AMA, and then they admin discharged somebody without even calling me, like, what would you do? And I just took a deep breath in, just like you were kind of laying out. I said, well, first and foremost, take away the goal of that hidden census number by Friday. Just take that out of your mind. Practice a little CBT. Take it out and put it on the shelf. Just remove it for now and focus on the root cause of the issues. Why did that patient AMA? What could we have done different? Why did we have to admin discharge this person? What could we have done different? And work backwards, the hours before, the days before. It's kind of like thinking about, those that are in recovery. When relapse occurs, it's not necessarily when the drug or the drink enters the body, it's the mindset the hour before, the mindset the day or week before, where the relapse really started to build traction until the point of no return. And I said, what your staff needs to realize is not, hey, we're all working to hit a goal. We're all hitting a number. And when we do that, wow, we get a pizza party or we get an ice cream. Those are human lives behind every census point. That's a human life. That's somebody's loved one. That's somebody's mom, dad, son, brother, friend or foe. Focus on that human life. Focus on what we can do better for that person. And if we couldn't do it for that person, we learn from that person to do it better for the next or for the next. And I told him, I said, I guarantee you, when you game plan with your leadership team from that compassion, the patient focused compassion, and not the, oh, let's hit the number because corporate, your outcomes will continually be better. And so to answer your question in that scenario, it's where do we focus our priorities? Are we as business leaders going to solely focus on Excel sheets to run a hospital, or are we going to focus on the patients in the hospital, both patients and staff in the hospital, to allow them to create positive outcomes? And so I think it's a mindset. And I think, anybody that's new to the seat, it's all about numbers. It's all about quantitative, right? Because they're being judged, especially if we come from a biz dev aspect, right? I can remember big corporate America, admission directors, biz dev directors, and CEOs, man, they're the first ones to go when the census tanked. I mean, literally get fired when the census tanked. And so I think, I'd be interested to hear, man, how have you, I know you've had a very distinguished career. How have you navigated the corporate census panic and everybody goes manic? What are some things that you've exercised to get through that and still keep the progression steady?
Interesting. There's two answers to that. One is past state, one's future state. So past state, very analytical, right? So the numbers don't lie. And a good example of that is we had a census dip in the fall of 2020 where I was working. And I was able to really quickly identify that our calls to admits changed. It was usually like 4 calls per admit, went to 5.1. Doesn't sound like a ton, but that's a 20+% jump in calls to admits. So, what would you do first knee-jerk reaction? Well, the Steve of past would have said, admissions team is terrible. They're not closing. It's garbage. Everything's bad. But what
Off
we ended
with their head.
yeah. Let's throw someone else under the bus. Let's blame. But what we end up doing instead is we went down chain, kind of like you talked about. Let's go down chain and see what's happening. And downstream, what ended up happening was our historical calls or clinical assessments to approval. So people did a clinical assessment, got approved. It was like 85%.
Okay.
That number dropped to 70%. Okay, that's significant. That's actually literally causing the difference here. That's the delta that we need to find. Why is that? And so working with clinical, working with admissions, having several calls, we identified the buckets at that time. This is a few months into 2020, were either too high mental health acuity due to the isolation, too low of substance use acuity because they were smoking a lot of marijuana and weren't residential necessary, but wanted to stop smoking marijuana, and we needed to find a new solution. So I was able to take that information back to the outreach team, back to the marketing efforts, and say, let's redefine how we talk about our program so we can get less of these edges and work more in the middle. And 2 months later, we were pretty much back on track. And so the pressure from above was, Steve, our census is lower. What are you going to do about it? Here's what we found is the problem. Here's the timeline it's legitimately going to take to do something about it. And when we do something about it without chopping heads and doing all that stuff, we're going to be back to where we are, but better, because the call volume we're seeing is going up. Our call volume will continue to go up, but the value of those calls will increase. And so that's a very tactical, I guess, mathematical approach. What I found with Growth Sherpa, what we're doing now, which I really want to grow, is something I'm very passionate about, is my first year into Growth Sherpa full time. I was mostly an independent person working with treatment centers and lowering my handicap and doing all these great things, right? But
Right.
it was a good time. I enjoyed my first year. I had some great clients. I enjoyed working with them. We got a lot of movement, but I realized that no treatment center has a single source problem.
Right.
That revenue is all departments. So Growth Sherpa grew, and what we're focusing on now with clients who are open to a full discussion about how to grow is similar to trauma-informed care or evidence-based care. It's mission and vision-driven revenue generation. And so we're taking their mission statement, we're taking their values, we're taking their vision statement, and we're pushing that into how you grow holistically with that in mind. What does that mean for how does your outreach team operate? Who should be on the bus? What are their PIs or their interviewing questions that we want to have? What do we do to create that person? Your marketing efforts. Are you a podcast person? Are you a webinar, an e-blast, a conference? How does it align with here? And so I think my future state is going to be so closely aligned with the core principles of organizations that we work with, that they won't get that pressure from above because everything is actually synergistic for once. It isn't you guys over here make money, we take care of people. It's we're all part of this process. And so that's what I'm excited about industry wide as far as solving the revenue culture gap that I've seen at so many treatment centers over the last decade plus.
I agree 100%. I was in a conversation a few weeks ago. I'm working on a project. Can't quite announce it yet, but excited to see it develop. And was talking to what a team that has a national presence. And their question to me, as I'm assimilating the leadership team to assist them, was, well, what will your priorities be? What would be your main focus? And I literally just looked at all of them and I said, everything. And they're like, well, no, we understand, but in order, what is it? No, everything. And I think the more seasoned we become, we realize we have to always be able to step back and look at the entire arena. Because you're absolutely right. The facilities that I've worked in, the facilities that I've led, the facilities that I've helped consult, there is never, ever just one problem and we have a magic wand, we fix that, and then it's just, unicorns, rainbows, and Skittles coming down. No. And it's constant. As soon as we repair or revitalize an issue in nursing, oh, that then stemmed a issue in clinical. And then the techs, and then overnight techs, and then days and weeks. And all of a sudden you realize the easiest thing to do is just step back and really start to look at the entire operation at once and realize everybody is a cog in this beautiful mechanism and machine to make it work cohesively. And as soon as we prioritize one or the other, well, then you're going to hurt somebody's feelings. You're going to demoralize a department. Well, they're not that important. They're not doctors, or they're not that important. They're not clinicians. No. Everybody in this ecosystem is equally important. We never know who's going to get the best information from the patient. In my experience, it is typically a housekeeper or somebody in the dining hall, where the guard of the patient is let down. They speak openly when they're getting their mashed potatoes, steak, and gravy, and they're like, I'm glad I'm eating this. I'm really craving a drug today. And if we didn't empower that frontline dining staff to then immediately report that, so that the clinician, the care coordinator, everybody could wrap around that patient, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. And so I love what you're saying is, you got to look at everything. You just step back and look at, I wish in my career that the corporate overhead that I've worked for, not worked with, but worked for, I wish that at some points they would say, hey, we think the issue is this. We're not sure. Find out what the issue is. More often than not, it's, hey, you got to fix this. That's the problem. And that's from out of state, sometimes 3,000 miles away. They really have no introspective understanding of what the landscape is right in front of us, boots on the ground. And so I hope that as I progress as a leader, I remember that, hey, when I go into a situation and I assume I have the identified the problem or the problems, that I'm still open-minded to saying, hey, this is what I see, but I'm really interested to see what you all think and what you all feel, so that we can work together.
Since we're wrapping up, I want to see if we can get one parting bit of wisdom for you. What would you say to maybe a new treatment center owner, new CEO, who's coming to this industry for the first time, might have come from industries that don't have the same amount of interaction with humans that are most vulnerable, or even patient care in general, but have decided to open a treatment center and decided that that's the new business plan they want to do? How would you advise them into starting off on the right foot with their teams, with their programs, with the culture, with their patients, so that they can build a lasting success for what they're trying to do?
Absolutely. I'm going to answer that by talking to the Cameron Bolish in his first CEO chair, right? Man, hindsight is a gift of wisdom. To anybody that has capital or that has the means to open a facility, take over a facility, but you are a newcomer, please, please, please remember humility, humbleness, and honesty. You're not the first person to do this, and you're not going to come out of the gate being the best person to do this. think about your network, think about mentorship, think about those individuals that have come before you, have failed until success took over, and have the knowledge and the experience, strength, and hope to guide you and mentor you. It's and once again, you hear my kind of commonality. I talk to leadership and I talk to employees just as clinicians and sponsors talk to patients. Is you're not alone. Don't think you have to operate alone. The stronger your network, the stronger solution focused you're going to be. And that I can't emphasize that enough. And we've seen ventures fail because of that lack of humility or humbleness, right? And they had beautiful funding, they had beautiful facility, brick and mortar, gorgeous landscaping, the nine, and then all of a sudden, 6 months down the road, staff's walking out, patients are on Google talking about everything and the food, and the owner or the CEO is looking around like, what? Well, it's because you tried to make your own agenda better than what's already been working in our industry, and I think it goes back, what's the old phrase, don't reinvent the wheel. No, just stay open-minded to the fact that you're not, and you don't have to be the very best. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be perfect. And allow yourself the humility to grow. Allow yourself to be vulnerable in and around those trusted inaugural members of your team to allow you to grow with them. And I just really, it saddens me to see really great programs driven into the ground because of poor leadership or because of poor delegation and management. And I like what you said, man. I was resonating on when you were starting your team in what we would learn to be the onset of a pandemic, and your whole playbook just had to go away. I another thing that you said, when I was running a biz dev team in California, we had two group text threads. One was me and the entire team. And then I asked them also to have a group text without me. And one of them said, well, why? I said, because I want you all to be able to talk about me behind my back. I want you all to be able to vent. I want you all to come up with creative ideas as a unit and then share them with me. And it's giving everybody the voice. And I think, in closing, it's just, we're all human. Some of us, prescribe to the belief that we were born perfect and we become flawed, or we were born flawed and strive for perfection. I just think all of us at some point are a hot mess. And once we really get down to pulling the masks off and letting the ego not run wild and really just becoming honest with ourselves, our higher power, each other, we realize we're all in this together. And so, what I can accomplish by myself is nowhere near as impressive as what I can accomplish when I surround myself with like-minded individuals and we become solution focused and positive focused. And remember, it's not about making a dollar. It's about saving a life. And yes, at the end of the day, if we're business owners or CEOs or we're a corporate voice, this is a business. We do have to understand the human capital. We are in the business of helping others. And you said it perfectly. That admission coming in, generating revenue, it should not be to make a corporate office rich. It should be to give back to the doctor, pay the nurse, pay the clinician, pay the landscaper, pay the yoga instructor, and then reinvest in the quality of care for the patients and reinvest in the quality of environment for the employee. And so I'm excited to see where the future takes us. We're starting to see a little bit of a breakdown of the large corporate, infrastructure. There's more outreach to consultants and to subject matter experts to kind of come in. It appears we're on the verge of finally investing back in the employee and putting forth an education. I think the old joke is, between the CEO and the CFO, somebody, wants a raise and the CEO says, or the CFO says no, and it's going to cost too much. And so that person quits. and the CEO has to hire somebody new, but they want, a starting salary that's now market, long story short, it costs so much less to invest in your current staff and your current employees and to pour into them. Because remember, they are pouring into the patients, they're pouring into the community, they're pouring into the loved ones and the family members. And if you have an adolescent unit, they're pouring in twice as much to the kiddo, to the parent guardian, to the state. We have to remember that everybody's cup at some point is going to run dry, and we have to be there to fill each other up. And that's why, watching the progression of Growth Sherpa and seeing what you're doing and the team you're putting together and the philosophy that you're allowing us to learn from, man, I'm really excited to see where that takes you and your team, but also the infiltration into, corporate healthcare America.
Awesome. Well, Cameron, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you guys have watched it to this point, thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed it. And feel free to reach out to Cameron on the socials like LinkedIn. Always ping us if you need anything, and have a great day.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Lead Climb. We hope you picked up some valuable insights to help optimize your patient acquisition and grow your behavioral health organization. If you found today's discussion helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with your network. And if you're looking for expert guidance in digital marketing, admissions, business development, or any other piece of the patient acquisition puzzle, Growth Sherpa Consulting is here to help. Visit us at www.growthsherpaconsulting.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on The Lead Climb.